about the performance practices in Bach's Partita No. 2 Chaconne over the last 40 years. So before we delve right into the weight of this piece, let's first talk about Bach. So specifically in 1720, he was going on a 2-month trip with his employer, Prince Leopold, and he received devastating news that his wife, Maria Barbara, passed away and was buried in his absence. And he was so devastated, and people have many debates and theories behind this, and one of the famous theories is called the tombeau theory. And this tombeau theory is by the musicologist Helga Dion, and she felt that the Chaconne was a musical monument for his wife, Maria Barbara. And so Maria Barbara musicologist Helga felt that Bach has hidden several melodies of Easter and funeral chorales in the complex layer of the Chaconne. And so while this is a very debatable theory, this is just, it's not a proven fact, but it explains why over a century performers perform and approach the work not only as a dance, but more of a sacred and emotional struggle between grief and hope. In this Chaconne, violinists actually interpret these works in a wide variety of styles, and the Bach has sonatas and partitas with a collection of pieces that has challenged even the most experienced performers. So the Chaconne is the 5th and final movement of the Partita. It follows a Baroque dance form with continuous variations over a repetitive ground bass. For the violin, it's D, C sharp, B flat, A. So just for information, the Chaconne is originally for the violin, and because I'm playing on a viola, it will be transposed to a G, F sharp, E flat, D. Here is the beginning few bars of the Chaconne with the highlighted marks on the ground bass that you can see from the G, F sharp, E flat, and D. Talking about the structure of the whole Chaconne, there's a total of 64 variations. It has many different kinds of variations, ranging from 4 different kinds. There are variations that are only 4 measures long. There are variations that alternate in its form. There's also variations that only lasts for 8 measures, but stays in the same form. And lastly, there's a variation that balances between the variation and the changes in the variation. It follows a 3-part structure called the ABA structure. And in the ABA structure, we can see in the Chaconne, it starts off with a D minor section. So for the violin, it's a D minor section, but for the viola, it's transposed to a G minor section with a total of 33 variations. And here, we can see that people interpret this as the initial struggle and the grief, followed by the D major section, where for the viola it will be a G major section with a total of 19 variations, and people interpret this as a glimpse of hope or heaven. Lastly, we return to D minor. In this section, for viola it will be a G minor section. This is where the Chaconne leads towards the conclusion of the ending, and it concludes with a total of 12 variations. It follows a triple meter with more of an emphasis and lean towards the second beat, but this is not prominent throughout. It happens in the first theme, as you can see, and Bach uses the agogic beat 2 on the beginning because the beginning starts off on the second beat. And the meaning of agogic beat is that he elongates the duration of the notes rather than putting an emphasis on the dynamics. So you can see the first bar, the second bar, and third bar follows the Gaudic beat. And as we all know, Bach is known for his polyphonic works. He uses a variety of multiple voicings on a singular melodic line. Here is the original manuscript of Bach that wrote the Chaconne. And you can see that he has very good organized, structured writing on his score. But compared to the modern score that we see, we don't actually see a lot of details that we often see in the modern world scores. So this is why people felt that they called this the silent manuscript, because they felt that there were no details, no indication of tempo, dynamics, fingerings, or bowings, stuff that you often see on the modern score. And people interpret this in such a wide variety of style because of all of this. And with all of the no manual, no fingerings and dynamics, people felt that Bach might have trusted the performer to know the rules of the style. So 40 years ago, the rules of the style was 19th century opera. But today, we look at this in terms of Bach's original writing through the ink of his pen when he was writing the Chaconne. There are also a couple of evidence that we can see in the score. Firstly is the beaming. So we can see the different kinds of beaming that shows a bit of the articulation. Besides that, we can see the multiple voicings throughout. He uses upper stem on notes to show the soprano line. And then for the bass notes, most of them he would use the lower downwards beam. And this shows the multiple voicings that he's trying to show in the Chaconne. Besides that, we can also see the slurs. So stuff like this slur like this is pretty balanced throughout, thin throughout, but there are slurs that are much more thicker in certain areas to emphasize the specific emotion he wants in that note, showing its importance and its emphasis. So to make things a bit more clear in this lecture, I have talked about how Bach has composed the Chaconne in 1720 during the Baroque period. But after that, in the 1800s, which was our Romantic period, it was when people started to rediscover the Chaconne, and they felt that the Chaconne was incomplete, and they wanted to add a piano accompaniment into the Chaconne. So figures like Brahms and Schumann, they tried to make more piano accompaniments towards the Chaconne. After that is our era of self-expression. So I will be focusing on the era of self-expression, comparing with the modern world. During this time is when people were trying to express more. People were trying to seek for something in music. So performers were approaching the Chaconne in a very different approach, which I will explain later. And lastly, we have our modern day, which is now, and people played the Chaconne following the historically informed performance movement. In this HIK movement, people approach the Chaconne in a more relatable rhetoric approach, going back to the Baroque roots, focusing on all the Baroque dance and the style. So I will be focusing on the era of self-expression, comparing to the modern day, and seeing the difference and why it has happened, and why people interpret it in such a different, distinct way. During the era of self-expression, there are so many great violinists that we know. And there are some performers that had public recordings, there are some performers that did not have public recording. Therefore, violinists like Preissler does not have a public Chaconne recording, but I've added him in because he is one of the greatest violinists. I will be giving examples from Heifetz, Nathan Milstein, and Menahan in my lecture. There are also a couple of reasons why they played in such a way. Firstly, it was because it was during the time when World War I and II just ended, and they felt that people were seeking for a more emotional approach in their playing. They were looking for consolation. And so performers like Preissler and Heifetz felt that their duty was to breathe life into notes. They felt that if performers performed in a way that is more academic, they found it a bit cold and not relatable to that period of time. Which is why they approached the Chaconne in a faster vibrato with heavier bow strokes. Besides that, one of the reasons why they played it in such a distinct way is because of the performance editions that were available during that time. Urtext editions during that time were very rare, so performance editions were more common. And this was, examples would include International Torpedoes edition that we see today. In these performance editions, it replaced Bach's writings, original markings, but they followed what was the tradition during that time, what was handed down by their teachers. And so people were using the performance editions more during that time. It was not necessarily just replacing Bach's original markings, but it was more of the performance edition, the editor's choice in their romantic vision, which is why they approached the Chaconne in a more romantic, more heavier bow stroke kind of way. Lastly, we also have the torch bow, which is the modern bow that we use today. During that time, they used the modern torch bow because it was the evolution of the bow. And so that bow provided a full sustaining in their sound, which shows in the Chaconne. And they also create a very long line and seamless line, which kind of ignored the natural decay that was more prominent during the Baroque period. So talking about why the sound changed, we were talking about the different kinds of instruments, which is our bow and our instrument, and the tuning. So here shows the example of our Baroque bow and modern bow. The Baroque bow, which is this, it has a convex shape, which is very different from how we see today. As we know, our modern bow has a more straighter, concave kind of shape, which shows the difference in their playing approach. And so it produces a different sound. It is naturally stronger in the bottom, but lighter on the tip. And there's also a difference in the strings. So during the Baroque period, they used the gut strings. And the gut strings, which is this, it produces a more articulated sound, while our modern day, we use metal strings that produces a more projected sound. So during the Heifetz time, they used the torch bow, which is what we use today. But the Baroque period, they use these kinds of instruments and tuning and bow. Here's the evolution of the bow that we see. The first four is our Baroque bow, and you can see the shape is very different. It starts to kind of change throughout. And this is our convex shape. And then we get to the number 8, which is our modern bow, and it follows a concave shape, which is the modern bow that we use today. So let's give a listen to Heifetz to give just a listen of how he played the Chaconne. Was a Russian-American virtuoso. He is a great violinist, and as you can hear, he has very intense vibrato. He is so technically perfect in his playing. And here are some musical characteristics of his sound. He has a more forward-driven tempo, following the momentum. And the way he plays the chords, it has an attack, and there's a more crisp sound that we hear. He attacks the chord with 3+1, which is three notes plus one note, or also with a chord that is 2+2 notes. And he is very free in his voice. He has sustained vibrato throughout, and he goes up into one string to keep the position going. So that the melodic line does not break in between. And you can hear there are also occasional slight spit. It's more common in the Romantic period. Next, we have Menahem, and he is a very deeply respected musical figure of the 20th century. And he plays the Chaconne in a very humanist approach. Let's give a listen to his playing. Different than Heifetz. Oh, it's pretty dark, but he's kind of clearer. He doesn't really slide as much as we see in Heifetz, and he also has a lot of beliefs and quotes that I will show here. He really tries to address the importance of bringing out the voicings in the polyphony texture. So he says that, but certainly the most important thing is to observe the clear and clean conduct of the individual voices. This also applies in the many movements which are only one voice, for that is only a superficial aspect. And there may be, in fact, 2, 3, or 4 voices within that one voice, so that, like a ventriloquist, the violinist on his 4 strings must continually change color and strings to achieve this oral clarity. The counterpoint and the harmony are in fact implied, and every effort must be made to bring the different voices out clearly, even though there is never more than one voice sounding at a time. So with this in mind, you can kind of understand why he approached it in such a different way compared to Heifetz. He also uses Bach's music as a spiritual journey. He also quotes that Bach is the pattern of the universe. To me, his music is profoundly a religious experience. Playing the Chaconne is like being in a cathedral. You're not just playing the notes, you are communing with the divine. He also tries to seek for the truth, so he kind of sacrifices more of the clean sound in his playing. And he is very free in his rhythm, using a rubato that shows the kind of bring out more of the emotional weight of the harmonies. And as we see, he's also pretty similar with Heifetz, using a more weighted approach in the impact of the chords. And similar to Heifetz, he also uses sustained vibrato. Here are a comparison chart of the musical characteristics of all performers during this era of self-expression. As we know, Heifetz is known for a very intensive, explosive approach. Chrysler, he doesn't have a public recording, but based on research, he is very known for his warm and flashy tone with his sweet vibrato. Nathan Milstein, that we didn't get to give a listen because of time, but he is very silvery and polished in the way he plays. He keeps the momentum going forward. And lastly, as we talked about just now, Menahem, he approached the Chaconne in a more spiritual, having a more raw and vulnerable tone over the clean sound. As for the modern performers, we have Rachel Potcher, Shinsuke Sato, and Isabel Faust. For Rachel Potcher, she is a very great violinist in our modern day. She's one of the first violinists that plays in a Baroque style in the most authentic way, and she clearly demonstrates a lot of her consistency in her playing with ideas like articulation and dynamics, and she plays it in a sensible way. So even when we see the quote as she says, Baroque performance practice is a language that we need to learn in order to do music justice. We need to know the grammar of the language in order to construct sentences and to give things meaning. The rules are just a way of doing things, and they are in total service to the expression and the content of the music, so that the listener understands the storyline. This is right at the top of everything we do, that we get the meaning across. Even through her quote, we can see how she's trying to be relatable with things that we know, which is grammar. Her interpretation of the Chaconne is one of the greatest examples, especially for violinists who are trying to experiment with the Baroque style. She performs it in authentic way because she uses the Baroque instrument and the tuning and plays it in a way that's relatable to modern performers. Let's give a listen to her interpretation. We can hear that she doesn't really use a lot of vibrato. She really tries to be very natural in the playing, very consistent, clear articulation and dynamics. She does not have a lot of expressive timing. She just keeps the momentum going, trying to reflect the dance style, and uses different kinds of bow strokes. she studies a lot of the Baroque stylistic features in her playing. Next, we have Ciaccona. He is a violinist that approaches the Chaconne with the impression of improvisation. So even the most seasoned listener would feel as though they're listening to the Chaconne for the first time. Every note he plays has a particular function. There's a particular placement and articulation within the larger form of the variation. And you can hear how he reshapes and revoices every time there's any repetition in the music. He does this with a flourish or ornamentation, which is not written on the music. So he approaches it in a more improvisational way, trying to balance between the unpredictability but also the natural and dance-like. Let's give it a listen. He has a very fast tempo, but he also uses gestures in his playing, so you can see how the broken chords are being connected using the gestures. And he is faster in the approach of the Chaconne, reflecting the dance. He's very natural also. Uses different characters and sounds for the different variations. He also uses different voicings, but also telling the story through the different lenses. He is very fast driven, so he doesn't really stop a lot, but he has a lot of, he uses improvisational spirit with ornamentations. I would say pretty similar to Rhetoric, but his thinking is a bit different, but he uses a lot of gestures. So when I approached the Chaconne, I was trying to figure out how many things I should be aware of. So there are a couple of principles of interpretation, such as notation, polyphony, harmony, meter, dynamics, inequality of notes, which means the stresses, the tension and release, or importance of the notes. We have fingering, note length, bow direction, articulations, and ornamentations. Here are some difference compared to the modern day and the old school. Let's give a listen to Heifetz, but let's look at Bach's melodic line that he wrote. Heifetz, let's give a listen first. Let's see how he plays. Articulates the notes to show the sustaining sound in the chords, and he also arpeggiates before the beat so that the top note hits downbeat. Compared to the modern day, we have Rachel. Actually, three of the modern day performers, they approach the Chaconne in this way, kind of following Bach's original writing, but they don't really sustain as much because it's pretty difficult to sustain the chords. Let's give a listen to Rachel Potter. Compared to Ciaccona. performer. I really liked his playing because he's a violist, but he also approached the Chaconne in a very rich sound. When we hear the Chaconne, we see how they kind of retake every time, but Rhetoric just goes how the bow goes, so down and up and down and up. Let's give a listen to his playing. He has a very sustaining sound in his playing. So we can see the differences in the technique of the chords, where the old school uses the arpeggiating technique before the beat, but for modern period, we start the bass on the beat. There are also many debatable issues of, no, I wouldn't say issues, but debatable theories of the Chaconne. One thing would be the chords, which is in measure 8 to 15. And people play it so very differently. There are different options of how they play. Firstly, they play the chords upwards, which is how we see the score, which is like that. But there are people who perform it with the chords downwards, which is the upper note to the bottom note. Okay, and then we have a combination, which is the turning, which is the bottom note to the upper note back to the bottom note, which is and the second and third options are the best ways in preserving the melodic line, but in my playing I'll be thinking of it as a harpsichord, so I'll be playing the chords with the first option, which is the bottom note to the upper note. In terms of articulation, it's also very different. Let's give a listen to high fifths. Let's give a listen to Manhattan. So we can hear both of them have a more sustaining, connected sound in their articulation. And let's give a listen to Sato. On specific notes. He uses the rule of down bow, which is emphasizing the strong beats using down bow and lifting the bow on weak beats when needed. You can hear he has breath in every 8th note that he plays. In terms of polyphony, it's very prominent throughout. This is one of the lines. I've highlighted it so that it's easier to see. We have the soprano line in the green, the middle line, which is our alto and tenor line that fills up the chord, which is blue, and yellow, which is the anchor A that you will hear with yellow highlight. Let's see how they play the Chaconne of this in a different way. We will start with the old school, which is Milstein and high fifths. So we can see how he really tries to bring out a lot of, they're pretty, bring out a lot of the bass note, kind of going momentum forward. And let's give a listen to high fits. So Menahem and Milstein, they actually treat this section, articulation is different, but they treat this section as a crescendo throughout. And compared to the modern day performers, let's give a listen to Rachel Podger. And compared to Sato. A lot of the anchor, the repetitive A note in here. Next we have vibrato. So vibrato is used differently. Modern day now we use minimal, and even if we use it, it's on to emphasize the dissonance. But in the old school, they sustain the vibrato a lot. So let's give a listen to high fits first. And then we have Milstein. So you can hear sustained vibrato throughout. And we have Isabel Faust. And you can hear that she really uses very minimal amount of vibrato. Talking about the manuscript, there's also many debatable topics about this, which is the arpeggio. And in this section, Bach actually writes out the pattern of the arpeggio at first, but then he continues to put arpeggio, which is circled in red, but putting block chords, which shows a lot of why people played the arpeggiation area so differently. High fits approaches this section in a very distinct way. Every change in variations, he tries to change up the strokes or the slurs. This actually, 1, 2, 3, 4 follows the way he changes the variation that we hear later. He tries to change it depending on the intensity of the Chaconne. Let's give a listen and let's follow through the different kinds of ways that he plays. changes up the different bowings and slurs that we heard just now. He keeps the momentum going. Compared to Yehudi Menahem, he approaches the arpeggiation area with a more different way, but more simplified. So he slurs two notes per bow, and he also switches to 2+2 chords when it gets a bit more intense. Let's give a listen. And then when it gets a bit more intense, he does this. So these are what they did differently. Let's give a listen to Rachel Proctor. Her strokes are it's very clear, and she tries to be transparent in her arpeggiation area. So with everything combined, with the combination of the comparisons of what we did just now, I would like to conclude with my own personal interpretation. It was very difficult to figure out what's the right answer, but with a bit of more research, understanding the Baroque style, I've decided to use a more minimal amount of vibrato, just selective, only on the harmonies that are more dissonant or towards the peak of the melody. And I will also try to prioritize more of the second beat in the beginning, following the dance style, which is the Chaconne lilt. And because Bach also implemented bowings in the manuscript, but sometimes he missed them, he did not write them. I will try to implement a more parallel bowing in any repetitive sequence. I will also not follow Heifetz's way because he does a lot of occasional slides and all that, so I'm going to focus on lower positions, and plus on the viola it's more difficult to really project the sound as much. So yes, that's what I'm going to do. In terms of this foundation, I will focus more on the bass note, prioritizing the ground bass, because that's the foundation of the Chaconne. I will also try to differentiate between the different voicings, as we talked about the soprano line, the alto line, and the bass line, using different speeds and contact points in my bow. I will also use the rule of down bow, which is emphasizing any stress notes using the down bow, any lifts for up bows, and following the natural gesture of the broken chords. In terms of the debatable topic of arpeggiation, there are two sections, which is the minor section and the major section. The minor section, I will start off with 2 notes per slur, and then I will go on to sextuplets. So in this area, because the chords change to a 4 note, because of the 4 note, I will start to change to a sextuplet, which is 3 notes per bow. The second section, which is the major section, this arpeggiation, I will group it in groups of 13ths, prioritizing the bass notes. As you see, I've highlighted here. And any moving line, I will try to bring it out. So, yes, I will end my lecture with a very relatable quote by Robert Levin. The language of Johann Sebastian Bach is supremely logical, and in that logic reside clues to tempi, dynamics, and expression. In short, all of the information necessary to enable the performer to arrive at an interpretation that accords with concepts of good taste and style as understood at the time the music was composed. But how are we to define these? It's obvious that even though we do our homework, studying all of the relevant performance practice literature, primary and secondary, the conclusions we reach can be only subjective, which is as true now as it has always been. For even in Bach's time, differing interpretations were surely the norm. It is impossible, therefore, to postulate any interpretations as the only correct one. With that, I will perform my Chaconne. Thank you. Making your way all the way here. I hope you enjoyed the very long lecture. I hope you learned something. But as you can see, there's many different, different interpretations. It's a very difficult, one of the difficult movements of the Partita, and people actually perform it as just a standalone performance. So yeah, I hope you enjoy. Thank you.